Yuna had never seen so many aliens in one place before. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous. It was built inside a space station the size of a small moon, floating above a massive gas giant that glowed orange and gold beneath them. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform, and in those seats sat the representatives of over 300 species from across the galaxy. Yuna walked 2 steps behind Captain Tejo, holding her translator tablet close to her chest. She was 19 years old, the youngest member of the crew aboard the human diplomatic vessel Hanel. Her job was simple. She listened to alien languages. She translated them. She helped people understand each other. That was all. She was not a soldier. She was not a politician. She was just a girl who loved languages. The humans had been invited to this summit under the promise of peace. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 11 years, ever since their ships had first crossed into known space. In that time, they had been treated like children at a table full of adults. The older species smiled at them politely and ignored them completely. Humans were considered emotional, short-lived, and unimportant. Tejo had told the crew before they arrived that this summit was an opportunity, a chance for humanity to finally be taken seriously. He had stood in front of them in the briefing room, with his hands behind his back, and his face calm, the way it always was. Tejo never raised his voice. He never showed anger or fear or even excitement. Some crew members joked that his heart rate probably stayed the same whether he was sleeping or in a firefight. But there was something in his eyes that made people listen when he spoke. Now they stood on the central platform of the council chamber, surrounded by alien faces that looked at them the way a person might look at an insect that had wandered into their house. Grand Arbiter Volsis sat at the highest seat. He was the leader of the Galactic Council, and had held that position for over 400 years. He was Tesseri, a species that stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 long arms and skin like polished gray stone. His eyes were black and deep, and showed nothing. When he spoke, the entire chamber fell silent, not out of respect, out of fear. Volsis opened the summit with a speech about unity and cooperation. His voice echoed through the chamber like the hum of a great machine. Yuna translated his words into her tablet, her fingers moving quickly. She had learned 6 alien languages in 3 years, just so she could be useful on missions like this. She was proud of that, even if no one else seemed to notice. Then Volsis changed the subject. He said that 3 months ago, a human cargo vessel had entered sacred Tessari space without permission. He called it a violation of galactic law. He called it an insult to the Tessari people. He called it an act of aggression. Tejo's expression did not change, but Yuna saw his hand move slowly behind his back. His fingers closed into a fist. The evidence was shown on massive screens above the chamber. Sensor logs, flight paths, timestamps. It all looked very official and very convincing. But Yuna had studied enough alien data systems to notice something wrong. The timestamps were formatted in a way that the Tessari had stopped using 2 years ago. The evidence was old, rebuilt, fake. She looked at Tejo. He gave the smallest shake of his head. Not now. Volsis continued. He said that this violation could not go unanswered. He said that the council had discussed the matter and decided that humanity must offer a symbolic gesture of submission, a demonstration that humans understood their place in the galaxy. The chamber went quiet. Volsis said the gesture would be a live execution. One human from the delegation, chosen at random by the council's automated selection system, would be put to death on the central platform. The execution would be broadcast across the galaxy. This would serve as both punishment and warning. For a moment, Yuna did not understand. Her translator tablet displayed the words clearly, but her brain refused to accept them. She read them again and again, a live execution broadcast to the galaxy, one of them. The automated system activated. A beam of blue light swept across the human delegation. It passed over Taeho, over Jisoo, the combat medic who stood with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. Over Soha, the communications officer who had been Yuna's best friend since training. The light moved slowly, like a finger deciding who to point at. It stopped on Yuna. A sound came from the chamber. Not gasps, not shock, just a low murmur of acceptance, like this was normal, like this was simply how things were done. Yuna felt her legs go weak. The translator tablet slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a crack that echoed in the silence. She stared at the blue light on her chest and could not move, could not breathe, could not think. Soha made a sound beside her, a small, broken sound, like something inside her had just shattered. Jisoo took one step forward, her hand reaching for a weapon that was not there, because they had been told to come unarmed. Her face was white with rage. Taeho did not move. Volsis looked down at the humans with an expression that might have been amusement. He said humanity had 30 minutes to comply. If they refused, the Council's armada, 12,000 warships currently surrounding the station, would destroy every human vessel in the sector. He said this calmly, the way someone might tell you the weather. 30 minutes. 30 minutes for humanity to decide whether to kill one of their own or be destroyed. The chamber waited. The alien delegates watched with mild interest, the way they might watch a small animal caught in a trap. Taeho raised his hand and asked for permission to speak. Volsis, clearly entertained, granted it with a wave of one of his 4 arms. Taeho stepped forward. He looked up at the Grand Arbiter. His face was perfectly still. His voice was quiet and even, and it carried through the entire chamber without effort. He said only one sentence. You will regret the next 27 minutes. A few of the alien delegates laughed. One of them leaned to another and whispered that humans were always so dramatic. Volsis smiled. It was a cold, empty smile, the kind that had ended civilizations. He ordered the guards to take Yuna to a holding cell until the countdown was complete. 2 Tasari guards, each twice her height, stepped forward and took Yuna by the arms. She did not resist. She could not. Her body was not listening to her anymore. She was pulled past the human delegation, past her crewmates, past the faces of people she had lived and worked with for 2 years. As she passed Taeho, he did not look at her. He stood perfectly still, facing forward, like a statue carved from something harder than stone. But he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, just soft enough that no one else could. Don't close your eyes, not once. Yuna was pulled through the doors of the chamber and into a long, cold corridor. The doors shut behind her. The lights above hummed a low, steady tone. Somewhere behind those doors, a clock started counting down from 30 minutes. And somewhere deep inside the calm, quiet mind of Captain Taeho, a war had already begun. The airlock of the Hanuel sealed shut behind Taeho with a heavy metallic hiss. 2 Tasari guards stood outside, watching through the narrow window with bored expressions. They had been ordered to escort the human captain back to his ship and keep him there. They expected him to cry, maybe beg. That was what humans did, according to everything they had been taught. Taeho walked past his crew without a word. He moved through the narrow corridor of the ship with steady steps, turned into the command room, and sat down at the communications console. His hands did not shake. His breathing did not change. He pressed a single button and opened an encrypted channel that did not officially exist. 3 star systems away, Admiral Dowan was sitting in the officer's dining room aboard his flagship, the Gaoman. He was eating rice and fish, alone, reading a report on a tablet propped against a water glass. He was a large man with broad shoulders and gray hair cut short. His face had the kind of lines that came not from age, but from years of carrying decisions that no one else wanted to make. His communicator buzzed once, a private channel, one that only 7 people in the entire human fleet knew about. He tapped it open. Tejo's voice came through, flat, controlled, just 5 words. They touched one of ours. Dohan set down his cup. The small sound it made on the table seemed louder than it should have been. He stared at the wall for exactly 2 seconds. Then he spoke. How long? 27 minutes. Dohan closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. The man who had been quietly eating dinner was gone. In his place was the officer who had spent 11 years preparing for the moment the galaxy finally showed humanity what it really thought of them. That's more than enough, he said. He ended the call, stood up, and walked to the bridge of the Geomon. His officers looked up as he entered. They knew his face. They knew what that expression meant. Protocol Jindo, he said. Activate it now. No one asked questions. No one hesitated. Across 3 star systems, signals went out to 200 human warships. They were small, fast, and built with technology the Council had never seen and never thought to look for. They had been hidden in asteroid fields, behind moons, inside the sensor shadows of gas giants. Waiting, not for weeks, not for months, for years. They were not heading toward Tessari Prime. They were heading toward 6 targets that no one in the galaxy would have expected any young species to even know about. The Council's primary supply relay stations. These stations were the veins of the Council's military power. They fueled the warships from across the galaxy. They powered the Armada's navigation systems. Without them, 12,000 warships were just 12,000 metal boxes floating in the dark. Back on the Hanel, Jisoo moved through the lower decks with purpose. She was the combat medic. She had been on the crew for 5 years, and in that time she had saved 16 lives, taken 4, and stitched her own wounds shut twice without painkillers. She was not tall, but there was something about the way she walked that made people step aside. She stopped at a storage bay marked Medical Supplies, Class 3. She typed a code into the lock. Inside, behind rows of bandages and surgical tools, were crates that did not contain medical supplies. She opened the first one. Inside were compact plasma rifles, fully charged. Jisoo began handing them out. Every human crew member received one. They took them without surprise. They had trained for something like this. Not this exact moment, not this exact scenario, but every human who served on a ship in alien space had been taught one truth during their training. The galaxy does not care about you, so you have to care about each other. On the command deck, Soha sat at her communications console. Her eyes were red. Tears ran down her face in steady lines, but her hands moved across the controls with speed and precision that she had never reached before. She was routing encrypted data bursts to 16 different locations across the galaxy, making sure every human outpost, every ship, and every ally knew what was happening. On the console beside her sat Yuna's bracelet. It was a thin silver band, old and scratched, the only thing Yuna had left from her mother. Yuna had taken it off before the summit because she was afraid it looked unprofessional. Soha had picked it up from Yuna's bunk. She was going to give it back. At minute 9, Dohan received confirmation from all 200 ships. They were in position. The relay stations were in sight. Each station was the size of a small city, floating in deep space, protected by automated defense systems and a handful of patrol ships. The Council had never imagined anyone would attack them. Why would they? No species had ever dared to challenge the infrastructure of the Galactic Order. Humans dared. At minute 14, in the Council chamber on Tessari Prime, Grand Arbiter Volsis sat on his throne, and watched the countdown clock with satisfaction. The number moved slowly downward. 26 minutes, 25. He felt no urgency. He felt no doubt. He had done this before. Not with humans, but with other species, decades or centuries ago. Young civilizations that had gotten too confident, too loud. A public punishment always brought them back in line. Delegate Fenra, a small blue-skinned member of the Mireshi species, approached him from the side. She was one of the minor delegates, representing a species that had no real power in the council. But she had been the only one to vote against the execution. She spoke softly. She urged Volsis to reconsider. She said this was unnecessary, that humanity was not a threat, that killing a teenage girl on live broadcast would not bring order. It would bring shame. Volsis looked at her the way a mountain looks at rain. Humans are emotional creatures, he said. They will cry, they will shake, and in the end, they will do as they are told. They always do. Fenra did not respond. She turned and looked at one of the screens, showing the live feed from the Hannibal. The camera showed Captain Tejo. He was sitting in his command chair. His eyes were open. His face showed nothing. He was completely, perfectly still. Fenra had lived for over 200 years. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had seen species go to war over insults, territory, and pride. But she had never once in her long life looked at a face and felt what she felt now. It was dread. Not the kind that came from anger or threats, the kind that came from silence, from stillness, from looking at someone and realizing they were not afraid, and that their calmness was not peace. It was a decision that had already been made. She stepped back from Volsis and said nothing more. At minute 18, the first relay station went dark. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no distress signal. The station simply vanished from the Council's strategic map. One moment it was there, a green dot pulsing steadily. The next, it was gone. Then the second one went dark. Then the third. Officers in the Council's military command center began shouting. Alerts flashed across every screen. Communication channels flooded with confused and panicked voices from patrol ships that had been stationed near the relays. In the council chamber, Volsis noticed the change. He turned his head slowly toward the strategic display on the far wall. 3 of 6 relay stations were offline. As he watched, a fourth one blinked and disappeared. His 4 arms, which had been resting calmly on the sides of his throne, went completely still. For the first time in 400 years, Grand Arbiter Volsis did not know what was happening. And somewhere on the lower decks of the Hannibal, Soha wiped her eyes, picked up Yuna's bracelet, and whispered to no one in particular. Hold on. Just hold on a little longer. The cell was small and cold. The walls were smooth gray metal, with no windows, no cracks, and no way out. A thin energy barrier hummed across the doorway, glowing pale blue. 2 Tessari guards stood outside with their backs to her. They had not spoken to her. They had not even looked at her. To them, she was already dead. Yuna sat on the metal bench, with her knees pulled up to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. She was shaking. Not from the cold, from the kind of fear that goes deeper than skin and bone. The kind that makes your body feel like it belongs to someone else. She tried to think clearly, but her mind kept replaying the same moment. The blue light on her chest, the murmur of the chamber, the alien faces watching her like she was nothing. She thought about her mother. Her mother had died 4 years ago, before humanity had even been invited to the galactic stage. She had been a teacher in a small town, the kind of woman who could make any child feel like they mattered. Before she died, she gave Yuna the silver bracelet, and told her that as long as she wore it, a part of home would always be with her. Yuna was not wearing it now. She had left it on her bunk. She wished she had not done that. She closed her eyes, then she opened them again. Tejo's voice was in her head. Don't close your eyes. Not once. so she kept them open. She looked at the walls, at the energy barrier, at the slight flicker of the lights above her. She listened to the hum of the station, the deep vibration that came through the floor, the rhythm of the guards breathing. And then she noticed something. The lights flickered, not randomly. There was a pattern, a short flash, then a long one, then two short ones, then a pause, then it repeated. Her heart was still pounding, but now something else was happening inside her. A small spark, a memory from her training. When she had first joined the crew, Soha had taught her old Earth communication codes for fun. Morse code, a system so ancient that no alien species would ever think to look for it. She watched the lights again. Short, long, short, pause. HOLD, hold. Soha was talking to her, through the lights, through the station's own systems. Her best friend had found a way to reach her through walls and energy barriers and armed guards. Yuna pressed her hand against the cold wall and whispered, I'm here. She did not know if Soha could hear her, but knowing that someone was trying, that someone was fighting to reach her, was enough to keep the darkness in her chest from swallowing her whole. 3 floors above, and half a kilometer away, the council chamber had become a place of barely controlled panic. The strategic display on the wall told a story that no one in the room wanted to believe. 4 of the council's 6 primary relay stations were offline. The green dots that had always been there, steady and unchanging for centuries, were gone. Grand Arbiter Volsis stood before the display with all 4 arms stiff at his sides. His black eyes moved from one empty space to the next. Behind him, the alien delegates whispered among themselves. For the first time, the whispers were not about the humans. They were about the council. Commander Alcon stormed into the chamber through a side entrance. He was a tall, broad-shouldered Tessari with scars on 2 of his arms from wars that most species had already forgotten. He was the head of the council's military forces, and he had never in his career delivered the kind of news he was about to deliver now. He told Volsis that the relay stations had not been destroyed. Human ships, using some kind of technology that the council sensors could not detect, had attached themselves to the stations and overridden their control systems within seconds. The stations were now under human command. The fuel supply lines that kept the 12,000-ship armada running were in human hands. Volsis turned to face him. His voice was low and sharp. He ordered Alcon to send the armada to destroy the Hainul immediately. Burn the human ship. End this. Alcon hesitated. He explained the problem. If the council ships attacked, the humans controlling the relay stations would cut the fuel lines. The armada would have power for hours, maybe less. 12,000 ships would be stranded. Helpless. Volsis said nothing for a long moment. Then he struck the arm of his throne with enough force to crack the stone. At minute 23, Tejo opened a broadcast channel. Not to the council, not to Earth's government, not to any military command. He opened it to everyone. Every frequency, every network, every screen on every world in the galaxy. His face appeared on monitors in homes and offices and ships across 4,000 planets. His voice, calm and steady as it always was, filled living rooms and council halls and military bases. An estimated 900 billion sentient beings heard what he said next. He told them the truth. He told them that the Galactic Council, under the leadership of Grand Arbiter Volsis, had demanded the live execution of a 19-year-old human girl. He told them that the evidence used to justify this demand was fabricated. He told them that the girl's name was Yuna, and that her only job was to translate languages so that different species could understand each other. He showed her file on the screen, her training records, her language scores, the 6 alien dialects she had taught herself. A photo of her smiling at a cultural exchange event, standing between 2 alien children, helping them read a human storybook. Then he showed something else. Something that Soha had found in Yuna's personal files. A letter. Yuna had written it 2 years ago, on the anniversary of her mother's death. She had never sent it. She had never shown it to anyone. It was a letter to her mother. In the letter, Yuna wrote about her life on the Hanu, about the stars she had seen, about the alien languages she had learned and the people she had met, about how she sometimes felt small and invisible in a galaxy that did not care about humans. And at the end, she had written one line that broke something inside every person who heard it. She had written, "Mom, I know I am not special, but I am trying to be useful. I hope that is enough to make you proud." Taeho read that line aloud. His voice did not crack. His face did not change. But across the galaxy, billions of beings went silent. In the council chamber, Delegate Fenra stood up from her seat. The broadcast was still running. The cameras were still on. Every eye in the galaxy was watching. She reached up and removed the insignia from her collar. It was a small silver pin, the symbol of her position on the council. She had worn it for 60 years. She held it in her hand for a moment, looking at it, and then she set it down on the table in front of her. "I will not be part of this," she said. 3 other delegates from minor species rose and did the same. Their insignias clicked softly against the table, one after another. Volsis watched them with an expression that had gone beyond anger into something colder, something that looked like the beginning of understanding. And below the chamber, in a small gray cell with no windows, the energy barrier hummed once and then went silent. The doorway was open. Yuna looked up. Standing in the doorway was Jisoo. She was wearing full tactical gear, a black vest over dark clothing, boots that were scuffed from running. There was blood on her left sleeve. It was not hers. Her face was hard and focused, but when she saw Yuna, something softened behind her eyes for just a second. In her hand, she held a thin silver bracelet, old and scratched, and still warm from being held. "Put this on," Jisoo said. "We are not done yet." Yuna took the bracelet, her mother's bracelet. She slipped it onto her wrist with trembling fingers. It fit the same way it always had, like it had been waiting for her. Jisoo held out her other hand. Yuna took it and stood. Her legs were weak, but they held. Together, they walked out of the cell and into the corridor. The guards were on the floor, unconscious. The lights above flickered one last time in a pattern Yuna recognized. Short, short, long, short. The Morse code for the letter L. Love. Soha was still talking to her. The doors of the council chamber opened, and Taeho walked in alone. He had no weapons, no armor, no guards at his side. He walked with the same steady pace he always used, neither fast nor slow, his boots making soft, even sounds on the polished stone floor. Every alien in the chamber turned to look at him. Thousands of eyes from hundreds of species tracked him as he crossed the open floor toward the central platform. The countdown clock above the chamber showed 1 minute and 42 seconds remaining. Volsis sat on his throne, with his forearms gripping the stone armrests. His black eyes followed Taeho like a predator watching something it had not yet decided to kill. Around him, his personal guards stood with weapons drawn, their long fingers wrapped around energy rifles that could cut a human in half from across the room. Taeho stopped at the center of the platform. He looked up at the Grand Arbiter. The height difference was enormous. Volsis was 3 meters tall, raised even higher by his throne. Taeho was an average human man, standing on a flat floor. By every physical measure, he was small. He did not look small. "You have committed an act of war," Volsis said. His voice filled the chamber. It was thick with rage, controlled, but barely. "Your species has attacked Council infrastructure. You have violated the sovereign systems of this body. You will answer for this. Teho waited until the echoes of Volsus's voice faded. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it reached every corner of the room. No, he said. You committed an act of war the moment you pointed at a girl and decided her life meant nothing. The moment you chose to kill one of our people to remind the galaxy that you are powerful. We did not start this. We simply answered. The chamber stirred. Delegates shifted in their seats. The broadcast cameras were still running. 900 billion beings across the galaxy were watching this conversation in real time. Volsus leaned forward. You are in no position to lecture me, human. My armada surrounds this station. Your ship is a speck of dust. Whatever tricks you have played with our relay stations will be undone within hours. And when they are, your kind will burn. Teho did not blink. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flat device. He held it up so that the cameras could see it. While the galaxy watched your relay stations fall, he said, a single human stealth ship delivered a device to the outer hull of this station. A gravitational disruptor. It is attached to the lower support ring, directly beneath the central power core. The chamber went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from shock. The kind that comes from understanding. Teho continued. He explained what the device would do if activated. It would destabilize the station's orbit. Tesari Prime Station, this massive structure that had floated above the gas giant for 600 years, would begin to fall. Not quickly, slowly at first. A gentle drift downward that would become faster and faster until the station and the 2 million beings inside it entered the gas giant's atmosphere and were crushed. He let that sink in. Then he lowered the device and said something that no one in the chamber expected. We do not want to activate it. He paused. He looked around the chamber, not at Volsus, but at the delegates. At the hundreds of species that had sat in their seats and watched as a teenage girl was sentenced to die. Humanity did not come to the stars to be monsters, he said. We came because we wanted to see what was out there. We came because we believed the galaxy had something to offer us, and we had something to offer it. We came because we thought, maybe, if we tried hard enough, we could belong here. His voice was still steady, still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that sounded like a crack in deep ice. But we will not let you kill our people for show. We will not stand on this platform and watch one of our own die so that you can feel powerful. That is not something we will ever do. Not today, not ever. The clock above the chamber ticked down. 1 minute remaining. Volsus stared at Teho with an expression that had changed several times in the last 2 minutes. Anger, disbelief, calculation, and now something that looked very much like the beginning of fear. He made his decision. He turned to Commander Ulcon, who stood nearby with his weapons still drawn, and gave a direct order. Forget the countdown. Forget the clock. Go to the holding cell and execute the human girl now. Personally. End this. He looked at the tactical display on the wall. 5 of 6 relay stations were under human control. The Armada was drifting, its navigation systems losing sync, its fuel lines controlled by the enemy. A gravitational disruptor was attached to the hull of the station he was standing on. The broadcast was being watched by most of the known galaxy. He looked at Teho. The human captain was watching him, not with anger, not with a threat, just watching, waiting to see what kind of man Ulcon was. Ulcon looked back at Volsus. He had served the Grand Arbiter for over 100 years. He had fought wars on his command. He had done things he was not proud of because he had believed they were necessary. He set his weapon down on the floor. The sound it made was quiet, but in the silence of the chamber, it rang like a bell. I will not die for your pride, Ulcon said. It was a small change, just a tightening of the skin around his black eyes, but it carried the weight of something enormous. It was the face of a man who had just realized that the world he had built for 400 years was made of something thinner than he thought. He turned to his personal guards. "Do it yourselves," he ordered. The guards looked at each other. They looked at the cameras. They looked at the billions of eyes watching from across the stars. They did not move. The chamber doors opened again. Yuna walked in. She was flanked by Jisoo on one side, still in tactical gear, still sharp-eyed and ready. On her other side walked Soha, who had left her console to be here for this moment. Soha's eyes were still red, but she was smiling, and her hand was holding Yuna's. Yuna's legs were not steady. Her hands trembled at her sides. She was still afraid. She had been afraid since the blue light touched her chest, and she was afraid now. But she was walking, one step after another. Her mother's bracelet was on her wrist, catching the cold light of the chamber. She walked past the delegates, past the guards who had been ordered to kill her and had chosen not to, past the empty seats where Fenra and the others had removed their insignias, past the cameras that carried her image to 900 billion watching souls. She walked to the center of the platform and stopped in front of Volsis. She looked up at him. This creature who was 3 meters tall and 400 years old and had ruled the galaxy like a god. This being who had ordered her death with the same feeling he might use to swat an insect. She looked him in the eye. She said nothing. She did not need to. The galaxy could see her. A 19-year-old girl, a translator, the youngest member of a small crew on a small ship, from a young species that the galaxy had spent 11 years ignoring. She was supposed to be on her knees. She was supposed to be dead. She was standing. The countdown clock hit 0. A soft tone echoed through the chamber. The 30 minutes were up. No execution, no war, no fire. Just a girl standing in front of a throne, and a throne that suddenly looked much smaller than it used to. Taeho stepped forward and stood beside her. Then Jisoo, then Soha. 4 humans on a platform built for their humiliation, standing together in silence. Volsis sat on his throne and did not speak. Around him, the chamber was still. The delegates watched. The galaxy watched. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not with a sound, not with a declaration, but with the quiet, unstoppable weight of a truth that everyone could feel, but no one wanted to say. The old order had cracked, and it had cracked around a girl who loved languages and missed her mother, and had never once in her life wanted to be a symbol of anything. But here she was, standing, eyes open, just like Taeho had told her. 6 hours after the countdown ended, Grand Arbiter Volsis was removed from power. It did not happen the way most people expected. There was no dramatic vote, no angry speeches. The delegates simply filed motions of no confidence, one after another, quietly and efficiently, like people cleaning up after a disaster. 17 species submitted their motions within the first 3 hours. By the 6th hour, even some of the Tessari delegates had added their names to the list. Volsis did not resist. He sat in his throne as the votes came in, his forearms resting on the stone, his black eyes staring at the empty space where Yuna had stood. No one spoke to him. No one approached. He had been the most powerful being in the galaxy for 400 years, and now he sat alone in a room that was too large for one person, watching his world end the same way he had tried to end a girl's life, quietly and in front of everyone. Delegate Fenra was appointed as the interim arbiter. She was the blue-skinned Mareshi delegate who had removed her insignia during the broadcast. She was small. She was from a minor species with almost no political power. But she had done the one thing that no one else in the chamber had been willing to do. She had stood up. Her first official act was a formal apology to humanity. It was broadcast on the same channels that had carried the threat of Yuna's execution. She spoke simply, and without decoration. She said that what the council had done was wrong. She said that the galaxy had a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, not to sacrifice them. She said that humanity deserved better, and that the council would work to earn their trust. It was a short speech, less than 3 minutes, but it was the first time in the history of the Galactic Council that any arbiter had ever apologized to anyone. The Tasari species fractured within days. A reformist faction, made up of younger Tasari who had watched the broadcast with horror, publicly condemned Vulsus and everything he had done in their name. They reached out to human diplomats directly, bypassing the council entirely. They said they wanted to start again. They said they were ashamed. Old alliances that had stood for centuries began to shift. Species that had always followed the elder races without question started asking new questions. Why had no one challenged the execution? Why had the evidence been accepted without investigation? Why had the automated selection system been allowed to pick a living person for death? The answers were uncomfortable, and they forced the galaxy to look at itself in a way it had not done for a very long time. Yuna became a symbol. She did not want to be one. She had never wanted to be anything more than a good translator, someone who helped people understand each other. But the galaxy had watched a 19-year-old girl walk out of a prison cell and stand in front of the most powerful being in the known universe without saying a word. And that image had burned itself into the memory of 900 billion people. Across the galaxy, younger species and oppressed communities began to use a phrase that spread faster than any political movement or military campaign. They wrote it on walls, they transmitted it on hidden frequencies, they whispered it in meetings where they were not supposed to speak. Remember the girl. It meant different things to different people. To some, it meant that one life matters. To others, it meant that the powerful are not untouchable. To many, it simply meant that even the smallest person can stand in the center of the storm and survive. 3 weeks after the standoff, Tejo was called to a private meeting aboard the Gaomon. Admiral Dohan sat across from him at a simple metal table. Between them were 2 cups of tea. The room was small. The conversation was not recorded. Dohan told Tejo that Earth's government wanted to promote him. They wanted to make him the public face of human military leadership, a hero for the media, a name for the history books. Tejo said no. He said he wanted to stay on the Hanel. He said he wanted to keep doing what he had always done, leading a small crew on a small ship in a big galaxy. And he said he wanted Yuna to stay on his crew, because she was the best translator he had ever worked with, and because every ship needed someone who reminded the rest of them why they were out here in the first place. Dohan studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. A journalist managed to reach Tejo before he left the Geomoon. She asked him the question that half the galaxy had been asking since the broadcast. Why had he done it? Why had he risked a galactic war, threatened an entire space station, and challenged the most powerful political body in the galaxy, all for one translator? Tejo looked at her. His face was the same as it always was. Calm. Still. Like water that had never been disturbed. Because the day we don't, he said, is the day we are not worth saving. The journalist stared at him. She opened her mouth to ask another question, but he had already turned and walked away. Admiral Dohan faced his own consequences. Earth's government launched a classified inquiry into Protocol Jindo. They wanted to know everything. How long had he been planning it? How had 200 ships been hidden across 3 star systems without anyone knowing? How had he developed technology that could override council relay stations in seconds? Dohan sat in front of the inquiry board with his hands folded on the table. He answered every question with patience and precision. Yes, he had built Protocol Jindo over the course of 8 years. Yes, he had done it without full authorization. Yes, he had hidden it from Earth's civilian government because he knew they would not approve it until it was too late. When they asked him why, when they asked him what had made him believe that something like this would ever be necessary, he gave an answer that silenced the room. "I read the Council's founding charter, the year we joined the galactic community," he said. "I read all 900 pages, every law, every clause, every exception. And when I finished, I realized something. The word mercy does not appear. Not once. In 900 pages of galactic law, there is no mention of mercy." I began planning the next day. The inquiry board did not punish him. They could not. He had saved a girl, humbled the council, and changed the balance of power in the galaxy without firing a single shot. There was no rule against that. Not yet, anyway. Back on the Hainel, life slowly returned to something that looked like normal. The ship undocked from Tasari Prime Station and began its long journey back to human space. The corridors that had been tense and silent during the standoff were filled again with the ordinary sounds of a working ship. The hum of engines, the clatter of tools, the low murmur of conversation. In the medbay, Jisoo sat on a bench cleaning her gear. Piece by piece, she disassembled her equipment, wiped each part down, and put it back together. It was a ritual she did after every mission. It helped her hands stop shaking. Soha leaned against the doorway and watched her. After a while, she asked the question she had been holding in since the standoff. "Were you scared?" Jisoo did not look up right away. She finished cleaning the piece in her hand, set it down, and then was still for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I was terrified. The whole time." Soha waited. "But I kept thinking," Jisoo continued, "that if it were me in that cell, Yuna would have come for me. She would have shown up with a medical kit and a stern look on her face, and she would have told me to stop being dramatic and come home." Soha laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm, the kind of sound that only comes from people who have survived something terrible together. Jisoo smiled. It was small and quick, but it was real. That night, Yuna stood alone on the observation deck of the Hainul. The room was dark except for the stars outside the wide, curved window. They stretched out in every direction, millions of them, bright and cold and impossibly far away. The gas giant of Tasari Prime was behind them now, shrinking with every passing minute. Yuna held her wrist up to the light. Her mother's bracelet caught the glow of a distant star and shimmered just for a second. She thought about everything that had happened. The blue light on her chest, the cell, the fear, Taeho's whisper, Soha's messages through the lights, Jisoo's hand in the doorway, standing on the platform in front of the most powerful creature in the galaxy and saying nothing, because there was nothing left to say. She thought about the letter she had written to her mother, the one that Taeho had read to the galaxy, the one where she had said she was not special, that she was just trying to be useful, that she hoped it was enough. She had not known anyone would ever read it. She had not known that those words would be heard by 900 billion beings on 4,000 worlds. She had not known that they would become the words that a galaxy would remember. She pressed the bracelet against her lips, the way her mother used to press a kiss against her forehead before sleep. The metal was warm now. It felt like home. "I think you would be proud, Mom," she whispered. The stars burned on ahead of her, steady and endless, the way they had burned since before any species had ever looked up and wondered what was out there. Behind her, in the corridors of the Hainel, her crew moved and talked and laughed, alive and together and heading home. The galaxy had spent 11 years looking down on humanity. It took 27 minutes for them to look up.